So I'm here today with Rodney Gibbs, who is the Chief Product Officer for the Texas Tribune. Thank you for joining me today, Rodney.
My pleasure.
And you have this very cool title, Chief Product Officer. Why don't you talk about your background that led you to this position?
Sure. I some days feel like an interloper here because I didn't come up through the journalism ranks primarily. I was doing design and product development and business development for software, namely video games. And so I had worked for a mid-sized, like 300-person web video game company, and then a few folks and I spun off and started our own company that did handheld games like Nintendo DS and Sony PSP, those kind of products. And then after that ran its course, another partner and I started a mobile apps company where we did games for news. And that's how I came to know the Tribune, as they were a customer of ours. We did quiz games for news. And so when we wrapped that company up, Tribune having been a customer, I had a dialogue with them ongoing just about, apps and different things. And they asked me to come in, and we had a series of conversations that led to coming in here and working on what we now call product. We weren't calling it that, at the time. And part of my initial mandate was Tribune at that time. It's still young, but it was very young then. It was about 3 years old. Had silos of engineering and design and editorial and our membership and business. And so part of my role or mandate was to try to bridge those gaps and get them to collaborate more, not work in silos. And over time, that's evolved quite a bit, and even the nomenclature's evolved, where we call it product now, where it wasn't, then we called it something different. We didn't really have a name for it even. But I think it's kind of fit into a grander, larger context of what you hear a lot of conversation now, not just the news biz, but in a lot of technology and software companies about product. And that's where I sit right now.
So talk a little bit about your general responsibilities for product at the level that you are at the Texas Tribune.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of the creative director, and I have a bit of a unique role or similar role in that we're at the crossroads of a lot of things here at the Tribune. Because, the focus and what, we're most known for is the journalism. And so that is front and center, and that's where 99% of the people who are familiar with us are familiar with our journalism. But, you peel that back a layer, there's a lot more than just the journalism going on, because we also have a big membership program. Just like a public radio station, we do membership drives. We have a big development group, or not big, but they're important. It does, foundation and major donor solicitations and fundraising. We have online ads and sponsorship, so we have an ad component. And then we have just like a range of different systems that we use to either organize ourselves or engage users or distribute our content in one way or another, be that event content or other things. I forgot to mention we do events too. We do about 60 events a year. So my role is kind of, in some ways, at the intersection of those things. And not just to be a traffic cop, because each of those groups really is well managed and knows what it's doing really well. But, often what Group A is doing either steps on the toes of Group B or could build on what they've already done or complement what they've done. And so a lot of times my role is to see what those intersections are and how do we optimize, how do we make it work better, and then how do we, in the long term, build new systems or tools or practices so that we're not doing one-offs or we're scaling effectively, or if something over here has value, that how do we access it across the organization? So one example was like we did a big project last year where we totally redid our CRM. So that's our client resource manager. We use Salesforce. And it's not something that people think about with Tribune. They think journalism, but we have members, we have clients that we sell ads to, we have donors, we have media partners, we have a lot of people that we loosely call clients and users, the website, people who consume news on the site or newsletters and things like that. So revamping the CRM was a kind of a Herculean effort because we hadn't done that before. But our goal was to get all that data in one place, not just to be tidy about it and good citizens, but now so that our membership people can speak to people who go to a lot of events in a really tailored way versus someone who has only opened one newsletter ever, so they could have really nice tailored outreach and communication. Similarly, so that if our development people are talking to someone who works for a major donor about a big grant, we don't want them to get, maybe a solicitation for a $5 membership at that time. And it's not that it's bad, but it's like, well, we already have a conversation with this person over here. Let's let that run its course and not distract them with other things. So it really helped get our different groups talking and coordinated. So that's a little bit down in the weeds, but it's the kind of thing where it involves multiple departments. It involved engineering and design and data work. But the end result now is that we all have this shared pool, and we're leveraging it in really smart ways, both to better, I think, serve our users so they have a better experience, but also so that we're not, competing with one another, stepping on one another's toes. And that, like, if someone over here gathers some intelligence or smarts about a certain group or certain person, it's leverageable across the organization so that, we don't, like I said, embarrass ourselves or say, oh, I could have introduced you to that guy 5 years ago. We've been buddies, those kind of things.
So it's really about maximizing the data of the organization in many ways.
That's a huge part of it, is maximizing the data. Increasingly, the data is so integral to what we do, both on the user side of watching how people respond to things and share things, and do they find us through search and things like that. But the internal data is, I would say, almost as important. And part of it is that we have so much, and it's overwhelming how much we have. And so kind of corralling that and organizing it and building practices and systems so that it's useful. It's not just like, oh, it's in the junk closet and there's so much in there, don't open it, you'll be overwhelmed. But make it so that, actually it's useful and that it's powerful is one big thing. I guess another big component of my job here is, is helping set priorities, because every group has needs, and they, God bless them, but they think their need is the most important need of the organization. And so part of my job is to kind of facilitate and lead a lot of those conversations, because we, while we're, really fortunate, we have 5 engineers, and we're, which is more than a lot of groups our size have. 5 can do what 5 people can. And we have a finite number of designers, and we have a finite number of video people. And so often, there's competing demands for their time. And so a big part of the product role is to coordinate with the other stakeholders, be it our editor or our membership director or our audience director, but to make sure that, we're all in alignment about, like, really we need to prioritize these 3 things because here's why. And often it leads to arguments and horse trading and, like, no, my thing is number 5 on your list and it should be number 2 or 1. But we can have those discussions. And so it's something that's evolving over time, and I think we're always trying to get better at. But I do feel like one of my big responsibilities is kind of fostering and leading those discussions so that so that things are moving forward as an organization, and people also understand, like, why their thing that seems so important is not being ignored, but where it kind of falls in the pecking order.
So good communication and collaboration skills are key to a product role.
Right. Yes.
So what do you see as the unique aspects of product management as it relates to journalism? That's compared to a tech company. Right.
That's a good question. A couple of things come to mind. One is, I think the product people have to have, a bit of fluency in multiple languages, so to speak. So, they don't have to be fluent in every language, but they have to be able to kind of go to another country and order off the menu and kind of get what they're expecting. And so, our people who are working in product might not be experts in programming and experts in fundraising and experts in journalism, but they know how to kind of, order off the menu basically, and know how to speak the language. So they have a sensitivity and some experience and ability to do that. In contrast, when I worked for more just traditional tech companies, there were product people who kind of were the go-between between the design people and the tech people and the business people, but often those people were really siloed. And so it literally was like kind of a messenger going between them and assigning things, versus here it's highly collaborative. And so often that translation or that, connective tissue between those groups is in real time, and it's, horse trading and negotiating and making this stuff happen. And the product people often are the ones that, can sense that, hey, this group's really frustrated. The product role often is like to kind of interpret and try to find solutions, because, the editorial group and the engineering group might be on different wavelengths, but we're trying to at least get them to have a shared vocabulary and a shared process like that. So that's one big one. I think the other one gets to that thing too, is that big challenge we have, and I don't think it's unique to us, is that the speed of news goes at a breakneck pace. And also, I think one of journalism newsrooms' strongest assets is the fact that, and I admire this a lot in our journalists and our editors in particular, is like that really good at making fast, smart decisions. But it's also optimized for you have problem, you quickly assess, you decide, you move on. Problem, assess, move on. It's not often, typically there's not a lot of time for introspection, for tweaking, for trying, I think it should be A, but let's try B. And if it's the wrong decision, we could always retract that story later. And, obviously that kind of thing doesn't work. The product people, in some ways are the opposite. Not that they're slow in plotting, but they want to be deliberate. They want to be thoughtful. They want to weigh all the options and, still move briskly, but not irresponsibly or. And so we're constantly trying to find what's that right balance. And we certainly lean toward and want to be biased toward the pace of news, but not at the speed or the trade-off of, making bad technology decisions, bad design decisions that might be optimum for the moment and get the job done, but it creates problems for us down the road, like technical debt or bad habits, or we did shortcuts that either directly bite us in the backside later, or that the person who did the shortcut takes another job next year, and then because he did things in a weird shortcutty way, no one can figure out what happened, and we're kind of stuck with a bad system. So that's a huge one, and that we're actively kind of spinning on and trying to find out what's the right way. Because the editors, we find, really want to work with us too, but also they, it's part of it's the speed that they need to go out. Part of it's just Hurricane Harvey hit, and so all bets are off. And there's always something like that. Maybe not a catastrophe like that, but an election or a major event or a governor resigns, or the news never stops. And so balancing the product people who are trying to support that and be sensitive to that, but also often have more long-range objectives than what's the next story. They're like, I'm building the system that's taking me 6 months, and suddenly there's a hurricane hit, and so I need input and approvals from all these other departments, and they're kind of spoken for 2 weeks. So those kind of trade-offs are really difficult to manage.
I mean, I'm particularly interested in how journalistic and editorial ethics and sensibility get built into digital products. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more about a process for making sure that that's happening?
Yeah, that's a good one. So what we try to do, or we do, is we certainly have checkpoints along the way, even if it seems like a purely technical thing, with editorial people. And we've tried different ways, and often what we end up doing is have kind of a delegate, so because we have 5 editors here who are stretched pretty thin as it is. We did a big examples. We did a huge revamp of our taxonomy system over the last year, which is, some ways mostly a geeky under the hood thing, but it does surface with the journalism and how we show related content, or if you, read this story, what's the next story we suggest to you. And so having an editor at the table, maybe not at every turn of the screw, but periodically every week or two to check in about here's how we're shaping the taxonomy. We're going to jettison these tags for whatever reasons, and we're going to consolidate tags under this, was really helpful, because he, often would say no, actually that's really important, or we would never call this topic X, Y, Z. You can't mash those together. It'd be confusing. We're finding things like that help a lot. The challenge we have with it, again, goes back to they're often stretched thin and busy. And so it's trying to find the right balance so that the product people can keep moving, but not be held up for approvals and things like that. We're a small enough organization too. It helps that it's fairly easy to grab someone and go, look, we have this thing, and what does it look like? We've also established kind of a process with, we try to grab just a rank and file reporter often to look at something like this, pass the smell test, does look good. Then we'll take it to an editor for a more formal approval. And then Evan Smith, who's our CEO, a lot of that stuff, particularly if it's public facing, will run by him. One, so he's in the loop, but two, sometimes he'll flag things like that's weird or crazy or, what have you. it is a challenge. And part of it too, just to again be down the weeds, is we want to have these opportunities for people to check in and have milestones and opportunities. But, like a lot of groups, we're meeting averse. And so we're trying to minimize how much time your butt stuck in a conference room chair. But the trade-off is that we've had problems in the past where someone ran off on a product, like with the CMS or a story page or something, not with journalism per se, but with the way just the story was presented, the layout, without taking input. And suddenly it comes out and, oh, here's the new thing. And our editorial side's like, what happened? I had no idea that was there. So that's an ongoing thing where I think we're always kind of fine tuning.
Absolutely. When you hire for product roles in your organization, what are some of the skills that you look for?
Well, and we're expanding that now, because to date we've taken Becca, who's an engineer, was data viz and now engineer, and she's also taken on some product role, because part of it, she was very interested in it and she was good at it. But part of it too is we've over time smartened up and realized we need these people. The Tribune, like a lot of startups, kind of went real fast and furious at the beginning. And as we've gotten a little more mature and taken a breath and kind of looked back and sized ourselves up a bit, and realized these product people are necessary. But we're not the size either, like a large news org, where we can just have dedicated product people who all day, that's all they're doing and thinking. I mean, that's my role at a higher level, but like a product manager, Becca does at halftime for us. And we have other people kind of do it in addition to their other job. But we hope to expand that and get more focused people down the line as we grow that can do that. But the skills we look for are, at least some kind of journalism sensibility. If not, a lot of them, like Becca was a journalist before she started in data viz. But, maybe they have at least a sensitivity to it or a background. I mean, I wasn't hired for this reason, but my early roles were in television and news for a PBS station in Chicago. So that was quite a while ago, but I certainly call on that quite a bit just for kind of the base level understanding of how it works and what's kosher and what's not kosher. So we often look for that. Some of our best people who are more on the designer product side came up through reporting. Like we have a great developer who's on our product team who was a reporter in Orlando and just started coding on the side and teaching himself and liked it. And then was doing it kind of there, half reporting, half not, half coding, and then came here to do it full time. So the journalism background is very helpful, but not essential. Technical, again, I would say if they're fluent, like they have, HTML and JavaScript and those skills and Python, that's top notch. That's awesome. But if not, if they're more of a project manager who just knows how to speak to that language and collaborate and understand that, that's very helpful. Design skills are really good. Again, if it's direct design or in print or web or video. And then, the softer skills are really paramount. The communication skills, the organization skills, that's a real big one. Because there's a lot of balls to juggle and a lot of things in the air to do that.
It sounds like a pretty broad skill set, so it's a unique kind of a person. And, as you know, my interest in this is preparing students for the jobs that they may be qualified for in the future. And I have thought that product management is particularly well suited for communication students who are tech savvy. So related to what you just said about skills, what advice do you have for students or early career professionals who might want to move into a product position?
That's a good question. Work with a team. That's a huge one. And even a small person team, a 2 or 3 person team. When I'm hiring here and in the past, we hired similar roles at tech companies, but it was always, even if it was a student coming out of school that had worked on a website or the college radio station or, a journalism project, something where they could just say, I had to deal with difficult people. Things came up that we didn't expect. Here's how we handled it. We ran out of time or money, or, to have those war stories, even if they're on a very small scale, I think is very interesting to us versus someone who's just kind of, been a solo person that they might be good for some other role, but not a product role. So those things are really good. I think showing a lot of ambition, again, that's kind of fuzzy, but, I'm always my interest is always piqued when someone, say, well, my job was X in college or my early career, but, I did this on the side, or I taught myself to code, or I got really excited about X, Y, or Z, and kind of just made it my mission to get smart about that. Because often, people haven't been on that path to come straight into a product role, but they're showing that they're kind of promiscuous in their interest, I guess is another way to put it. At least here, like our really good product people don't have a single vision. It's not that like I am product all the time. It's more like I can, cross a lot of these paths and understand and collaborate, and that, product is kind of that envelope that all that stuff fits in. So those things help well. If they have stuff that's out there that they can point to, and again, this doesn't have to be a Washington Post front page story, but it could be a small project or a passion project, or something that's not really like, oh, it wasn't, we're a news org. We're not just saying, show me some news you did, but maybe it was a website they made, or I do like weird sound installations, and here's why, and here's how it works. We're not often trying to hire for what we do necessarily. We're trying to find people who, we want to work with and think like, oh, okay, they can juggle all these things. They can communicate. They can talk different languages, so to speak. They've never been in a newsroom, but we still might hire them if we feel like, they could translate that to what we do.
Yeah, I keep trying to express that to students, that employers do really look for the things that you do on the side, because it demonstrates passion and it shows the ambition that you're talking about. And that you can figure out things on your own and solve problems, it's such a critical thing. And it's hard for them with everything else that they have to do to understand that they really need to be kind of whittling away at some of these things to have a strong portfolio. Yeah.
And it might just be doing a lot of reading and dabbling, but
just to have things to talk about.
Right. We have a question we ask in most of our interviews. This is a little more on the developer engineer side, but it applies to this is, like, what are you excited about lately? Like, is there something not in your job, but there's like you think's really cool? Maybe it's a project or a book or a concept and often like the best people are like, oh, like I really think this is promising, or I'm watching this closely, or I've been trying to learn this. The killers or the duds are the ones like we got a couple of, we asked that and they go, yeah, nothing really, just it's like, okay, well that's fine for you, but it doesn't set you apart if you're trying to break into this.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up, give me your take on the future of product in journalism, both at the Tribune, look in your crystal ball, both at the Tribune and how you see it for the broader, news media industries.
Yeah. It sounds kind of self-serving, but I think it's going to get more important as things go on. And part of it is, I think, taking the lessons we've learned here, and then also, extending that to what I hear from colleagues and read about in the trade and the industry press, is, as technology speeds up, as journalists themselves have to get more fluent and adept at telling stories and new mediums, smart speakers or car dashboards or, what flying cars or, whatever comes next, implants in our neck. I think that idea of a product person who can help corral that and, take all those individual strengths, like you're awesome at storytelling and reporting, you're an awesome videographer, you're an awesome programmer. Like, how do we leverage that into a cohesive whole and then apply it, not just to a screen on a computer, which every day becomes a little less relevant, but to whatever comes next. And to add to those skills, which I didn't mention earlier, like the ability to, understand how you test a product, how you, take user feedback, how you think about user experience and things like that, which often maybe your reporter doesn't care about or doesn't know about. Same with your maybe your programmer or your designer, doesn't give a flip about A/B testing, but to be that one that can be that cohesive whole, I think it's going to get more important as technology just gets more aggressive and weird, and we're getting news on our watch or wherever it comes from. I think the ability to be nimble is going to fall on the product person more than the editor or the programmer or the graphics person. They all certainly have huge important roles to play, but I think the product person is again the kind of one that's navigating it, as a group for that. So that excites me. I think that's where it's, I think it's going. I think there's, we're going to get smarter as an industry about how do you balance these demands of the news of just being voracious and breakneck with the urge of product to be deliberate and iterative. And, we joke here that our CEO loves like the P.T. Barnum big reveal, like, okay, don't say anything till it's all done and then rip the curtain down and, strike up the band. Whereas, a lot of our more product focused people want to like sneak it out, soft test it, tweak it, and then whisper, hey, come look maybe, and then build it. And so I think that, example is kind of personifies this struggle between the two camps. And, I'm certain that's not just us. I've talked to people at other orgs, big and small, that the same thing, how do you do that? I think we feel it, at least I believe, a little more acutely because we don't have the size to say, oh, well, here's an R&D group to go figure that out. Or here's we're going to put a product person on every desk in the newsroom who from the kernel of an idea is sitting there thinking like, how do we leverage all of our tools and audio, video, interactives to tell the story? So it's a particular problem that I think mid-size and small groups have like us, is that, how do you leverage those skills and that know-how and that urge at a small size? But I think it's going to get more important as we go.
Well, definitely one of the things that has come up in the process of putting this course together is that product thinking will become more central to the newsroom processes, and definitely what you're saying supports that. So I want to thank you so much for spending time today. This is really great insight to add to this course and to really share with the students some best practices. So thanks again. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.